Disclaimer. The following contains a review of a product intended only for those of legal age to consume it. The Manic Geek does not endorse underage drinking in any way and encourages those of you who are legally able to do so to drink responsibly.
Hey YouTube, what's going on? Mike the Manic Geek here. Sorry for the break between videos, but I was sort of deciding what I wanted to shoot content on next. And as some of you may have caught with my short little intro video for this channel, one of the things that I geek out over pretty hard is craft beer. So I decided to stop dragging my feet about it and make a beer video finally. The beer I'm going to be starting off covering today is from New Belgium. It is called Coco Mole. This is a spiced porter. Specifically, it is a spiced chocolate porter. Clocks in at 9% alcohol by volume. It's sold in 22-ounce bombers. And this is specifically brewed with cocoa and ancho, guajillo, and chipotle peppers. So yeah, this beer actually does have some heat to it, but it's an interesting kind of heat. Another interesting thing about this beer is that on the label it specifically mentions best enjoyed by January 29th, 2017, implying that this beer is capable of sitting in your fridge for a little bit and aging. Granted, you would have to be doing this at appropriate temperatures. Also, I don't really feel like this needs it, but we'll get into that later. So, how to review a beer. Well, I'm going to start off by saying that I am no expert on the matter. I'm just your average Joe enthusiast, the same as any other guy. I am going to be pursuing a Cicerone certification at some point, but basically what I'll be doing here is I'll be taking notes on my perceptions of the beer and, you know, how I perceive the flavor profiles on it, how it pours, etc., etc. So anyway, let's get into it. So this beer pours medium brown in color. Head forms on it to roughly about one index finger in width. The head is not particularly persistent on the beer, but it's not necessarily needed as far as the nose is concerned. The nose was actually fairly persistent throughout all of my tasting on this beer, and it gave off aromas of caramel woven in with cocoa, and you actually get some cinnamon and some of the chili pepper in the scent of the beer as well. But not to the it's not like someone shoved cracked black pepper up your nose or anything like that. It's just it's sort of like the scent that you get when you first chop into a fresh chili pepper. The mouthfeel on this beer, you know, it's surprisingly full, despite the fact that it doesn't pour particularly. It's not a particularly thick beer. It's not something viscous like an imperial stout or something like that. But it manages to maintain a reasonably full mouthfeel in spite of that. The only thing that I would critique this on as I tasted it is the carbonation is almost a bit much fresh out of the fridge. It starts to sort of collide with some of the flavors that you encounter, specifically the chili peppers. Now, the flavors that you get otherwise are these nice smooth cocoa and caramel flavors. You get this bright burst of cinnamon, which then gently transitions into the heat on the beer. Now, I say heat, but it's not actually like a lingering heat, at least not at first. It leaves your palate feeling relatively clean and unobstructed. You know, I don't know if any of you out there have ever had any of these super thick, like almost dessert-like beers, but they can tend to leave your palate feeling sort of washed out and saturated with a specific flavor. This beer does not do that, and I find that to be an endearing quality. But that's just my personal taste again. But yeah, the carbonation sort of collides with the cinnamon and the chilies in this almost abrasively at first. So that if there was a way to come down on the carbonation just a tiny bit, that would be ideal, I think, for this. But that changes a little bit once the beer sits for a little bit. Now, something that I do when I test my beers is after I've had my initial sips of it and taken down my notes in my little field note guide here, I let the beer sit for about 30 minutes. Let it aerate, let the carbonation start to fall out of it a little bit, let the flavors sort of develop with the temperature change of the beer. Because even with something like a Pilsner, something like a Kolsch, a Belgian triple, the flavor profile will change on the beer as the temperature changes. And especially with darker beers like porters and stouts, you want that temperature to elevate a bit on the beer before you start to, before you can actually get the full flavor profile and what's actually going on with the beer. Now, what happened after I picked this up after 30 minutes was all of the same flavors were present, but the way they hit was very different. The cinnamon started to really dominate the proceedings, but they dominated in place of dropped carbonation, which was actually a nice switch from the way I had it when I first poured it from the bottle. It almost smoothed out the beer a little bit up until you hit the chili flavor. When it finishes with the chilies at the end after it warmed a bit, the heat does intensify a little bit. It lingers on your tongue for a bit longer, even coats your throat a little bit. It's not abrasive, but if you're not the type of person that's into spicy beers at all, I might avoid having this warm up if you attempt to drink it at all. And it's interesting because even with all of the flavors intensifying after 30 minutes, it still doesn't soak your palate. And I'll insert some footage here so you guys can see the lacing on this beer, so you can see that the legs of the beer. This beer does not form particularly strong legs. It doesn't really cling to the glass all that well, which sort of lends to the fact that this sort of clears off of your palate easier than a lot of other dark beers, which again, for this style is a good thing. You wouldn't want all of these big chili pepper and cinnamon and chocolate flavors saturating your tongue, especially if you're doing something like a beer tasting where there's multiple beers that are being poured. You wouldn't want something like this drowning out your palate, and especially if you were pairing it with something like food. You want the flavors to sort of transition between each other. So that's really about all there is to say with this beer. If you're into this style of beer, I highly recommend it. Average price for this is about $9 for the bomber in my local market. I actually got this one on sale at my Whole Foods for $8, which at that price, I really couldn't ask for more in a beer. It's readily available. It's got really nice, well-rounded flavor profiles going on. It's relatively easy to drink despite the 9% alcohol by volume rating on this beer. And I would definitely pick up multiple bottles of this if you're capable of doing so. But yeah, let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Have you ever had a chili pepper beer like this one? Yeah, that's nice. So yeah, have you guys ever had a beer like this before? If not, what would you expect to encounter with something like this? Give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down if you liked or didn't like the video. If you want more similar content like this, be sure to subscribe and share the video. Let everyone else in on the glory that is New Belgium's Coco Mole. And yeah, that'll about do it for this one. So guys, this is Mike the Manic Geek signing out. See you guys next time.